Okay, we've learned something today already. We've done a lot of these and many of you have been to them, but for me and my guest speakers in the future, I think we have to have theme songs as they come up. What do you think, Wes? Kurt? Yeah? Okay. Well, we'll check on what your theme song might be, so maybe we qualify our speakers that way. Anyways, hi everybody, my name's Mike Stroll. I'm the CEO of Enesys 360, and it is our team's privilege to have you all join us for another one of our ETEs. For those of you that have been to these before, I think you know what to expect, or at least I hope you do, and we always try and raise the bar every single year. For those of you that are here for your first time, we hope this is an experience that goes far beyond a good time, but one that really allows us to do what the term ETE allows or suggests we should do, which is executive technology exchange. We have a great group of speakers tonight, but it goes well beyond this. It goes into the night when we have one of our spectacular dinners or post-event excursions with you guys. And one of the best parts about this is when we take some of the content that we talked about and get around the table and start sharing ideas together. I think this year more than any, this is probably one of the most important times for this type of event because so much is changing. The term digital transformation is one that's used by absolutely everybody in this industry to describe absolutely everything that they do. But the reality of it is business is changing. The role of IT is changing. There's somebody in this audience, actually he's not in this audience, but one of our speakers quoted him at one point in time, and he was talking about healthcare, and the quote was interesting. It was, IT is in the business of delivering healthcare. And I think I said that right. Close? Not even? Well, you can fix it when I get up there. Anyways, something like that. But the whole concept of delivering real services that go all the way to the stakeholders, which aren't just the people in your organizations, but the customers that use it, is one of the most exciting times to be in this business. Some of the things that we as an organization have invested in around digital transformation, both of the data center, the customer-facing services, and the workspaces, is what we're here to talk to you guys about today. And so I've been told in the past that I don't tell you what our goals are as Enesys 360. You can read a lot about us if you would like in the stuff we have or on our website. But we are now providing customers with workshops around helping them transform their desktops into digital workspaces, whether they run in the cloud, they run in other locations, and we're building products and solutions around that. But more importantly, customers are asking us, how do we get there? Cloud is on everybody's mind, digital transformation's on everybody's mind, and the same thing goes around the core of digital transformation, whether you're looking at DevOps or big data. And we've got speakers here today to share some of these, their ideas, thoughts, experiences, and warnings maybe about these types of things. So, moving on, because I have a short time to get this thing started. Our first speaker, got to put these on. Kurt Romer, he is the Chief Security Strategist for Citrix Systems. As those of you that have been here before know, we've had many people from Citrix speak in the past, but in this world of transformation, while we're being challenged constantly by security challenges, we thought that this would be the best speaker we could possibly have from Citrix here to talk about both the transformation that we're all going through and how you strategize for security. As the Chief Security Strategist, Kurt leads security, compliance, risk, and privacy strategies for Citrix products. As a member of the Citrix CTO and Strategy Office, he drives ideation, innovation, and technical direction for products and solutions that advance business productivity while ensuring information governance. An information services veteran with more than 30 years experience, his credentials include the Certified Information Systems Security Professional designation. He also served as commissioner for the U.S. Public Sector Cloud 2 initiative and led efforts to develop the PCI Security Standards Council Virtualization Guidance Information Supplement while serving on the board of advisors. That's it? That's it. With that, everybody, I present Kurt.
Well, thanks. Welcome, everyone. Great to be here, and look forward to spending a little time talking about the future of work and really how to secure that. I know there's a lot of things that we can get into. We've got a very short amount of time and only 30 minutes, but I'll make sure you've got a copy of the materials. We've got a lot back behind this, some videos, other things that you can share with your organization to help you plan for the future of work. As Chief Security Strategist, I'm thinking 3 to 5 years out in the future, and maybe even more in some cases. And so a lot of what you're going to hear right now are some of the leading questions and some of the things that will help us think about what's going to be important moving forward. And I really struggle with being behind podiums, but I guess I can't move, so we'll see how this works here. So let's jump into it. When you take a look at what the options are for securing the future of work and really what needs to be done and what questions we need to ask, the questions need to range from not only the operational aspects that we're all facing today, but also things that are very inspirational. So we might have aspects that include how can we gauge and measure and report on trust? How can security be something that's more programmatic and has SLAs associated with it, service level agreements, KPIs, key performance indicators, and other metrics, so that security is not just something that people go, are you secure? Are you not secure? Yes, no, depends on who I'm talking to, right? But it's something you can actually measure. And more interesting, security is not just about technologies. When you talk about information security and cybersecurity, most people automatically jump to their favorite technologies, right? What's security really about? It's about positive outcomes. And it's about producing those outcomes and having decision points that you make when those outcomes are at risk. And that's really what security is all about. And we have to think about it in those terms. We've got autonomous cars right now. Why don't we have autonomous security? Why do we leave so much to the end user to be able to determine whether they're doing the right things or not in all the different situations they're working in? How can we make things easier? So we're going to go through and talk about some of these questions and really shape what the future of work should look like from a security perspective. For the agenda, a couple things we'll cover. This will be interesting here. So how the nature of the future of work is changing, what we should be focusing on, what we should be thinking about. And this is not just technology, these are not just business trends. These are geopolitical trends, these are social trends. These are other things that factor into how people work and what they're doing as they engage in our work practices and producing work product for us. We'll also need to take a look at some of the organizational barriers and how today's organization in many ways is getting in the way and what we can do to help facilitate that moving forward, or at least recognize it so that we can make it much less of a factor. Also, everybody's heard about the Internet of Things, right? You got these wearables that we all have, or many of us have, that can measure heart rate. There's a lot of other factors. You can walk into a building, lights can turn on, you can automate your home, you can speak to Alexa or OK Google. That was a test to see if anybody's got one turned on here. And basically automate much of your life. It's interesting. So the Internet of Things is really pushing the envelope from a security perspective too. Why? Any thoughts? Well, the Internet of Things has added another leg to the security stool. We've always had the triad of security, which is confidentiality, integrity, and availability. IoT adds one more, and that's safety. If you're not thinking of the safety aspects associated with the Internet of Things, as we have autonomous vehicles, as we automate rooms, as we automate healthcare facilities, patient rooms, patients themselves that are walking in pre-instrumented with technology, we've got a lot more to think about from a safety perspective and from overall security and privacy. And along with that, how can we use some of these new technologies, cloud, mobile, IoT, to affect better outcomes for security and make life much easier? Okay, sorry, I'm from a vendor. I have to mention these next couple things: artificial intelligence, machine learning. How many people have heard those from vendors throughout the last year? It's impossible to not hear those words from a vendor, right? And as a vendor, you have to bring them up every time. Well, I'm going to bring them up in a little different way, because many people take a look at artificial intelligence and machine learning as logging plus plus, and how can we take some of the info in the logs and make it a little more available, make it a little more interesting? How can we maybe show things in a different way? But who are they showing this off to? When vendors talk about artificial intelligence and machine learning, who are they benefiting? Think about it. You know what the answer is today. Who should they be benefiting? And we've got information that's available to help not just IT and not just the IT security organization, but the entire business, all of our relationships, how we work with each other, how we collaborate. These technologies will really help shape our world and give us a viewpoint that we've never had before, give us insights we've never had before, and show off some really cool things. And I'll get into some of that from a security perspective. So when we take a look at the situations people are working from, you've got people who are working from home, people who are working from airports, airplanes, they're coming in from coffee shops, they're on mobile devices. What do your policies at work allow for today from a security perspective? If you're still kind of oriented towards people coming into the office and don't do this if you're remote access, you know who you are. Probably time to update your policies a little bit, because you might be somewhat behind the curve. I had a video in here, we'll play that later. But when we look at the future of work, there's a lot of other things we have to accommodate. And one of the big things here is accommodating the millennials. You've heard of them, right? They're all of our kids. I've got 2 millennials as my kids. And millennials are born digital natives. They've never been without computers. They've never been without the internet and the ability to be online. They look at the world in a little different way than all of us do, because they've always had the ability to just look stuff up. I used to have to go to a library. I used to have to know the Dewey Decimal System and how to go through and actually find things in books. With many of the millennials, they don't open a book unless they're actually in school. They don't need to. And they can find things much faster, and they can find relationships faster. And they're better at working with information and sharing with each other. And that's fantastic. There's a lot that we can learn from them if you're, in the baby boomer generation like I am. But millennials, from a security perspective, also can cause some major issues. Why? Well, they like to very freely share information. And so when you see millennials who are programmers, oftentimes they're putting information on the programs they're writing and problems that they're trying to solve out on websites somewhere asking for help. Sounds good, right? Unless that snippet of code just happens to have some business logic in it that was very sensitive intellectual property for your company and something that you paid hundreds of millions of dollars to develop and never wanted to get out. Guess what? That new millennial you just hired exposed that to the world and your competitors. Pretty amazing. And they didn't do it for malicious reasons. They did it to try to help out. We've got to bridge the gap there and really help bring the millennials in and help make sure that they're benefiting security. And a big part of this is, how do we face all of the challenges that are out there? And I'll leave you to read a lot of these as the helicopters hopefully don't shoot at us. This could be fun. When you look at digital disruption, there are lots of events and lots of technologies and lots of issues and trends that are shaping our future right now. We've got to pay attention to those, and we've got to very dynamically adjust our security policies in order to take advantage of it. So I said we're going to take a look at security from an organizational perspective as well. Let's do that. From an organizational perspective, the theme here is more, more, more. So we've got end users. What do they want more of? Anybody? Everything, exactly. That's a good point. They want more technologies. They want the ability to work from anywhere. They want more agility. They want more flexibility. I had somebody yesterday say they want more time. All of us would like that. End users are really driving and shaping the future of computing and how we're working right now. Are they also shaping the future of security? Yeah, unfortunately they are. And so what they're demanding more of oftentimes is leaving security in their wake and causing some major problems. We also have IT. What does IT want more of? They want more control. They want more technologies. They want more policies. IT is basically out there to try to make our lives more difficult, right? That's why we work around them as end users and as people in organizations. And even as IT professionals, how many of us use all of our own systems, or do we bypass them whenever we possibly can so that we can get work done? Guess what? Everybody else is doing that too. We're not just the exception. We got to be really careful with this. And then the chief security officer, what do they want more of? This is an easy one. You ever been in a board meeting? They want more money, they want more people, and they want more control, right? They want more scope. So this is a challenge because today's security organization and today's organizational view is really at odds with each other. We need to bring them together a little bit more. In doing that, I saw this little quote. Now, this was from a Gartner conference in Sydney, Australia that I was presenting at a few weeks ago, about 3 weeks ago. It's the Gartner Security and Risk Management Conference. I never take pictures of slides. I never take pictures in conferences. I took this picture. I think you can see why. This really amazed me. And for those of you who can't see it real well, I'll read it. By 2022, in 60% of large enterprises, business units will select the level of risk and cost. Wow. Do you believe that? Are you working towards that? Should this even be a goal? Or is this something that's just going to happen to us? Yeah, should have been that way from the start. I agree, Wes. See, I can hear you up here. That's good. Wow. So, yeah, absolutely. I mean, when IT was developed, we owned all the systems. We built the servers, we built the networks, we owned the applications, we knew where all the data was, we controlled everything. Is that still the case? Business units probably know the computing better than we do. They definitely know the applications better than we do, and they absolutely know the data and the risks to them better than we do in most cases. So we need to partner with them a little bit better. And Citrix had commissioned a study along with the Ponemon Institute. Organizations see that their information's at risk because of complexity in the IT environment. We've made it too tough for people to get work done is the way I read that. 71% say that there's risk from their inability to control employees' devices and apps. Really? Is that still a thing? I thought a lot of people were just bypassing IT, using shadow IT and going directly to the cloud. So control over devices and apps, is that really something we can do? I guess we'll see. And that's why 74% say that there's a new security framework that's needed. I completely agree. Hopefully you do too, because that's what we're going to be talking about for a few minutes here. So let's look at what that new security framework would look like for securing the future of work. First of all, from a Citrix perspective, when we talk about security, we're talking about centralizing apps and data, using virtualization, making sure that the data never leaves the data center, core tenets of virtualization for years. If you don't distribute the data, if it's not on every device and every USB key and everybody's enterprise file sync and share system out there, you have a little better control over it, don't you? Likewise, if you do have data that has to be mobilized, you can keep it in an enclave so that the applications, the data, the policies associated with the enterprise, they go on the mobile devices and they can be distributed, but they're managed by the organization. And that's got a side benefit for those of us as end users because it helps protect our privacy. Both of these things help maintain separation for people who are running their own systems. In a virtual world, if the data never hits your endpoint doesn't have to be in scope for things like forensics and e-discovery if it hits the fan. And similarly, from a containerization perspective, if you're doing this from a container perspective and not trying to manage somebody's device, you don't have IT going through there and saying, hey, it's 2 a.m., I'm bored, I'm going to go look and see what pictures people have on their devices, which, by the way, they can do if they manage your device. It's kind of scary. Policies as well have to be contextually aware. And what contextual awareness means is all the different devices, all the different situations, all the different work locations, what I like to call the 5 W's of access, the who, what, when, where, and why, are accommodated for every time you go in and try to access a new resource. And so you're not just saying, hey, you logged in, you can get to whatever you need. You're going through and vetting the situation and determining what security needs to be in place. So you're making it really easy for people to get access to public data, and you're making it increasingly more difficult as they step up the risk and as they're approaching transactions that could impact materially the entire organization, or maybe they crossed a threshold for things like a $10,000 transaction that they're approving. And then also from an analytics and insight behavior, let's make sure that we're utilizing this information to hit the business. So let's talk a little bit about that. Architecture slide, you can look at this later. I'll skip this, but basically it's no longer one perimeter. You need to constantly be redefining the perimeter for protecting data. And it's what we call the software-defined perimeter. We're making it programmatic so that it's something that can constantly be fluid so that it matches your needs and matches against the threats. Many different security initiatives that you need to be concerned about and be protecting against. These are all things that you can go back and walk through each of these and say, how are we handling this? And how are we handling this not just from an IT perspective, but also with our virtual supply chain, all of our partners, as well as the business units that we support. Okay, let's get into the meat of this a little bit. How many people are familiar with the NIST cybersecurity framework? Awesome, awesome. The majority of the folks, that's great. So you've got these core tenets: identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. And I love NIST's definition here. These are performed continuously and concurrently. These are not things that are just done at login. They're done all the time because situations are constantly changing. And they're done in terms of an operational culture. Oh, this isn't IT's responsibility, this is everybody's? That's awesome. And it addresses our dynamic security risk. So if this is done across the organization, you should be able to walk into any business unit and walk up to the business unit leader and say, what are your plans for respond and recover from a cybersecurity perspective? What do you think they'd say? They go, that's easy, that's IT's problem, right? They would say that today in many cases, but can they, should they? Is it still really IT's problem? In the nature of our cybersecurity incidents has gotten to the point where it is affecting the business. And when people look at some of the practices that have been in place from an IT perspective, we had patch management for years where we would not go through and patch systems until a certain amount of time has passed so that, those patches didn't impact the business. We didn't want to have any downtime. Well, take a look at the attacks of this year, namely things like WannaCry, NotPetya. Take a look at what happened with the Apache Struts vulnerability with Equifax. These were businesses that were materially impacted and had to report in their financials and through the SEC sometimes hundreds of millions of dollars of material impact. Why? Because of their IT patch management practices. Guess what? I bet those are being changed now. What do you think? So yes, we have to work together on this, and this is a big example. Now, for each of these, I have examples of things that you'll want to go through and take a look at. In the interest of time, we're not going to be able to run through all of these, but suffice it to say, if you're virtualizing, containerizing your data, you've got contextual policies, it makes it a lot easier to address each one of these. And also from a AI and ML perspective, keep in mind that you can go through and have the system, as people are accessing each different application, each desktop, each data element, AI and ML can go through and be able to determine not only who's doing what, but what relationships are out there. How are people working together? How are they sharing and collaborating data? Who's being most efficient at it? Who needs some remedial training? Who's got the best practices that the rest of the organization should be learning from? Remember that machine learning is basically telling you what the new normal is and telling you where anomalies are. It's learning what normal behavior is all about and what should be happening, and then it can make some recommendations based on that. Artificial intelligence is giving you completely new insights, and if it's not, you don't have it focused right. If it's just helping you answer questions you already have today, that's not artificial intelligence. So keep that in mind as you design the systems. From a protect perspective, one thing that I'd like to highlight here is that when you have all these different users and all these different endpoints and access to all the applications, each one of them can act as a beacon that can be crowdsourced to help identify what's going on out there from a data and cybersecurity perspective, but also how to best protect it. They know who's using what applications, what data, what's being shared, what's normal for the role, what's normal for that particular time period. And so you get a new idea of what's going on within the organization. It can also go through and say, hey, every quarter you've got a particular VP of a business unit that is accepting some risk that they really shouldn't be, because that risk is not 100% theirs, and there's some other mitigations that they could have done to be able to protect against that risk. But today, they're just blindly accepting it. So we can go through and be able to make some recommendations based on those systems. From a detection perspective, let's make sure that we've got visibility all throughout the virtual supply chain. All the applications we're using, the open source that it might contain, and so we have an understanding of what our threat landscape looks like that's very, very specific to access and specific to our uses of the system, and dynamically addresses some of the nature of the business and how it's changing. So we have the ability to detect both acute and chronic incidents, and we're looking at them not just from a single actor perspective, but we're also looking at them in terms of collusion. So if you did have people that were coming together, or nation states that have a very coordinated attack against across multiple sources, you're able to pull that together in ways that you otherwise would not be able to pull out of the logs. And there's one other thing that I want to highlight in terms of the ability to detect. So anybody who's been hit by WannaCry, NotPetya, something like that, the ransomware attacks, if you have, what do you do to be able to detect that? You know, people call in, say, hey, should I pay the fine or not? What should happen there? Yeah, you're detecting it, and then how do you go through and remediate against it once those events happen? Backups, rollback and recovery. Well, one thing that you might want to consider there as well is this is a successful attack against those endpoints or servers. And it may not be just against that data and that data that was backed up. You might have a secondary infection, and we've seen those where the operating system has been impacted and has been compromised. We've even seen firmware-based attacks where the firmware has been compromised. Guess what? Your root of trust is completely changed. And if your response to ransomware has just been roll back and recover, and you've got certificates on that particular server, those are roots of trust you should go through and be able to reissue your certs. If you haven't, you're going to want to go back and take a look at that. And that's part of the ability to respond. Make sure that as you're responding, the business is working with you and you're looking at your response processes, doing these in accordance with a plan, but also having artificial intelligence and machine learning go back and recommend what could have been done better, what risks were accepted that shouldn't have been, i.e. the bad patching process, and how things can be enhanced moving forward. And from a recovery perspective, make sure that your recovery is completely prioritized and that you're focusing on increasing your resilience over time. Like I said, I could probably spend an hour on each of those 5. We don't have time for that right now. We can talk about that at a later date. I'm going to leave you with a few key questions as you take a look at designing your new architecture for the future of work. The first is, what's your cloud endpoint strategy? When people go directly to the cloud, things like the browser are more in scope than ever. And I don't know about you, but when I look at the browser as being the primary security tool, that scares the hell out of me. The browser was the worst piece of software on any endpoint for years and may still be, especially when you combine things like Flash and Silverlight and Java and all these other extensions and interfaces with the system. If you don't have a cloud endpoint strategy, make sure you develop one. The second one is, how do you make sure that your most sensitive data stays within project teams? So if you've got a top secret M&A project you're working on, you've got something that you're working on that involves intellectual property, you've got some strategic plans for the business, for the board, make sure that those are staying within that team. And even if somebody accidentally or on purpose or gets hacked and tries to send that document out to somebody else, the attacker would receive the document, but the document's encrypted. They don't have the authorization to go ahead and bypass the encryption. They're not able to open it, and they get nothing. Very, very simple to do today. And if you're not doing that for your most sensitive data, you want to think about it. Information rights management helps quite a bit there. Look at all the different situations people are working in and how they work. Remember the millennials. And design around the 5 W's of access so that you're considering not just what device people are getting in from and whether it's a trusted device or not. It's more what should this user device and the entire combo of their situation be trusted to do. Next, how can you actually leverage IoT services for enhancing both security and physical privacy and enhancing safety? IoT brings a lot to the table, and there's quite a bit that we can be utilizing here, from authentication factors to bridging the gap between physical and cyber, and that's really what IoT is going to be involved with. And then last, and my absolute favorite question, how and to what extent can primary data responsibilities be moved from IT to business units so that the people who have direct authority for that data and for accepting and mitigating those risks are making those decisions? And how can all of us within IT and IT security help them do that and help to be the trusted advisors to take this into the next level? I'll leave you with some key takeaways, and with that, I want to say thank you very much. This looks like it's going to be an awesome event. This is my first year, so help me out. Thanks.